going to be reading you some stories from my books, and I'm going to start with a little poem about spiders because you know I like spiders and I often write about spiders. And this first one is a very short spider poem. It's from my book Nick, Knack, Knock, which you can actually click onto my website. You'll see them there. They're also available on Amazon. So this one is called Taking a Spider to School. Have you ever taken a spider to school? I carried a spider to school in my lunch. It listened all day to that boring Miss Punch. She historied and mathed and did English all day. That spider was brighter than next door's Miss Fay. And soon after school, that spider did strike and became a headmaster. We call him Mr. Spike. So you see, the spider had a plan. So it's always good to have a plan and be ambitious and think about what you want to do. Now, this next story is out of my book, The Story Tree. That's the green book with the tree, which I actually took the photo of that tree. That's a tree in Nha Trang in Vietnam. And this one, there's lots of words in here, so you listen closely and you'll see there's lots and lots of ums. This story is called The Bumbling, Rumbling, Tumbling Bumblebee. And remember I told you a week or so ago that all the stories in the story tree are stories that have been told to the story tree by the birds. And this story was told to the story tree by a buffle-headed booby bird on a blowy and blustery Tuesday. There once was a bumbling bumblebee who loved to tumble. He would tumble and bumble when his tummy started to rumble. When all the other bumblebees were flying in a straight line, the bumbling, tumbling, rumbling bumblebee was bumbling and tumbling through the sky, tumbling into clouds and rumbling into rainbows. The other bumblebees just could not understand the bumbling, tumbling, rumbling bumblebee. What was the name of the bumbling, tumbling, rumbling bumblebee, I can hear you ask. Well, I'll tell you. The bumbling, tumbling, rumbling bumblebee's name was Trick-a-Tony Tea. Trick-a-Tony Tea was full of glee because he loved to bumble and he loved to tumble, especially when his tummy rumbled. One day, Trick-a-Tony Tea was bumbling and tumbling down the main street because his tummy was rumbling. He thought he might find some tummy-numbing things to eat if he kept bumbling and tumbling down the street while his tummy was rumbling. A big red bird flew just past his ear as he was bumbling and tumbling and rumbling down the street. The bird saw his fantastic feats of bumbling and tumbling and rumbling and stopped mid-flight. "Bumblebee," the bird said, with his head cocked to one side, "you are very good at bumbling and tumbling with your tummy rumbling. What do you do for a living?" "I don't do anything for a living," said Trick-a-Tony Tea. "I just live." "Don't you get bored with your bumbling and tumbling and rumbling always in the same spot?" asked the bird. Trick-a-Tony Tea stopped his bumbling and his tumbling, although his tummy was still rumbling. "I've never thought about it," he said to the bird. "Why?" "You could come with me," said the bird. "I belong to the circus. You could do your bumbling and tumbling while your tummy is rumbling at the circus." Trick-a-Tony Tea thought about it for a minute and a second. "So I could," he said. So Trick-a-Tony Tea turned around right there in the air and bumbled and tumbled while his tummy rumbled all the way to the circus with the bird. What was the name of the bird, I can hear you ask? Well, I'll tell you. The bird's name was Rusty Redfeather, and he and Trick-a-Tony Tea became fast friends, and they even had a double act at the circus. So now lots more people watch Trick-a-Tony Tea with his bumbling and tumbling while his tummy rumbles. So there you are. That's the story of the bumbling, rumbling, tumbling bumblebee, Trick-a-Tony Tea. Now, in our next story, which is from my book Mermaids Are Cool, and you know that all the stories in Mermaids Are Cool are about the ocean and about how important the ocean is and about how we need to look after the ocean. And the sad thing is, at the moment in Hawaii, the ocean beaches are closed because somebody, I won't say who, has allowed some wastewater to get into the ocean. And we all know that we need to keep the oceans clean because 70% of the world's animals live in the ocean, and they don't put the rubbish in the ocean and they don't mess it up. So we need to be a bit more careful about looking after our ocean friends. Now, in this story, you're going to hear about Fish Lover. She's the mermaid who looks after fish, and that's a picture that Tifu's done of Fish Lover Mermaid. And you're also going to hear about Corallania mermaid, and she looks after the coral. So that's a picture of Corallania mermaid. And then you're also going to hear about Exquisata. She's the mermaid who builds reefs. So that is Exquisata. And this story is called Fish Lover's Fair. Fish Lover and Corallania were very unhappy. In fact, their sadness was big enough to fill the oceans of the world. All morning, the two mermaids had been watching fish and other sea creatures dying. All along the reef, they could see their poor dead bodies. And as they watched in horror, they could see the coral all along the reef losing their brilliant colours as they too had died with the fish and other sea creatures. Neither Fish Lover nor Corallania had ever seen anything so heartbreaking, although they had seen many unhappy events in the ocean. They were not sure what had brought about such a devastating state of affairs, so they went all along the reef to see if they could find out what had caused such a catastrophe. After all, it was Fish Lover's job to look after all the fish and sea creatures, and it was Corallania's job to look after the coral. And they had always carried out their duties with a willing heart and a happy smile. But this was different. This had happened so suddenly and without any warning, and now there were so many of their sea creature friends who had died. Sadly, they swam along the reef to see what had caused such a tragedy. In the distance, they could see a billowing black cloud. As they got closer, they could see black liquid pouring into the ocean and all over the reef. They kept swimming until they could see that the black liquid was coming from a pipe which was attached to a ship. They swam to the surface and were horrified at what they saw. There was a man in charge of the pipe, but he was asleep, and so he could not see that there was a big hole in the pipe. Out of the hole, a dark brown liquid was pouring. It smelt very sweet. Both Fish Lover and Corallania knew immediately that they had to do something to wake up the man and stop the pipe spewing the black liquid into the ocean. "Hey, man," Fish Lover called out, but the man kept on sleeping. Corallania mermaid tried as well. "Hey, man," she said, but the man kept on sleeping, and the black liquid kept pouring out of the hole in the hose and spewing all over the reef, killing more fish. Finally, Fish Lover picked out her special secret shell from her mermaid magic seaweed sack and threw it at the man. The secret shell hit the man on his shoulder, and finally he woke up. "Turn off the pipe," called Fish Lover as the sleepy man rubbed his eyes. "You are killing the reef and the fish," called Corallania. Then his eyes opened wide, very wide, as he finally saw what his sleepiness had caused. He rushed off the deck of the ship and turned off the hose. But it was too late to save the thousands and thousands of ocean creatures who had died when they could not breathe because the black liquid had used up all the oxygen in the ocean above and along the reef. Fish Lover and Corallania were too sad to say a word to the sleepy man. They swam back along the reef, and they could clearly see that the reef and all the coral were covered in a black layer of whatever the liquid had been. By now the cold water had turned the liquid hard, and it had attached itself to the reef. "This is going to be hard to shift," Corallania said to Fish Lover, "but we must shift it off the reef so the coral can come back to the reef and so that other fish and sea creatures will be able to live along the reef again." Fish Lover decided that she would take a closer look at the hard black stuff that had tainted the reef. She felt it. It was hard but sticky. She licked her fingers. It tasted sweet. "This must be made from sugar," she said to Corallania. "We must remove it and uncover the reef again," said Corallania. "We will need Exquisata's help to rebuild the reef." Fish Lover and Corallania swam silently along the reef, surveying the results of the man's inattention. "We need help," Fish Lover finally said to Corallania. "Yes," agreed Corallania. So Fish Lover blew a big blast on her special secret shell. The sound was carried by the waves all across the ocean. All the mermaids heard Fish Lover's call. Soon Fish Lover and Corallania could see a sparkling trail as the sun shone brightly on mermaids' tails as they swam towards them. "What do you need us to do?" asked the mermaids. "We must work together to remove the hard, black, sugary substance that has attached itself to the reef," said Corallania. "We need to clean off the reef so our fish friends and all our ocean creature friends will be able to live along the reef again," said Fish Lover. "How are we going to do that?" asked Exquisata Mermaid, who knew about building reefs from scratch, but not how to uncover reefs once they were covered in a hard black sugary substance. She had been out to the farthest reaches of the reef and was very upset about the black layers covering the reef that she had so carefully built many, many moons ago. We are all going to use our special secret shells to pry the candy, because that is what I think it is, off the reef, said Corallania Mermaid. And then what are we going to do with it? Asked Garden Esther Mermaid, who was most concerned about how the sugary substance would affect the seaweed growing on the reef. You remember Garden Esther Mermaid, she's the one who looks after the seaweed. Fish Lover has a plan, said Corallania, and all the mermaids turned to Fish Lover Mermaid to see what her plan was. We know that humans like candy, so we're going to have a fair and sell the candy back to them at the fair. Then we'll be able to rebuild the reef, she said. And the mermaids got to work with their special secret shells, being careful to remove the candy without hurting the coral reef. It took them a week and a day to remove all the candy from the reef. And when the humans heard about the mermaids cleaning up the reef, which had been ruined by careless humans, they lined up all along the seashore to buy candy from the mermaids at the fair, so that the mermaids, led by the reef-building mermaid Exquisata, could rebuild the reef, and so that the coral and fish and all the ocean creatures would have a home again along the coral reef. So that's what the mermaids did to stop the reef from being destroyed by careless people. And we really need to be more aware of how to keep our oceans clean. You know, Hawaii is a microcosm of the world, with people here from all over the world, and Noa Noa Hawaii is a microcosm of the traditional arts of the world, with beautiful patterns from many countries. They've been in business for 38 years with wonderful Hawaii designed batik clothing. Their hand-dyed and handmade clothes have patterns that are based on traditional kapa and tapa designs from Hawaii, Polynesia, Micronesia, Indonesia, even New Zealand and Africa. So check out all of the wonderful items that Noa Noa has on their website, which is www.noanoahawaii.com. So I'll be back next week, so bye for now.